Hello, my name is Dr. Ann Sam, and I'm an advanced research scientist at the Frank Program Child Development Institute at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And my colleagues and I, Dr. Sallie Nowell and Jessica Amsbary, and I will be presenting on e-learning modules for early intervention providers serving toddlers with autism. If you're familiar with the AFIRM modules, we'll be talking about those today, and this work is an extension on those AFIRM modules. So I just want to state that all the information that we're sharing today does not necessarily represent the policy of the Department of Education and should not assume endorsement by the federal government. So the project that I'm going to be speaking to today is in partnership with the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center, ECTA, also at the Frank Program Child Development Institute. And I also want to just acknowledge all of our participants that have contributed to this work, including toddlers, families, and early intervention professionals. As I mentioned before, this work will be part of the Autism-Focused Intervention Resources and Modules, AFIRM, in collaboration with the ECTA. So I want to go ahead and acknowledge that. You can find all the resources that I'll be speaking about will be available late summer of this year on our AFIRM website, and you can see the link here. And I also want to thank our AFIRM team and our ECTA team and all of our colleagues at the Frank Program Child Development Institute. So to give those of you who might not be familiar with our AFIRM modules, just a brief overview. So we have 28 modules that go through specific evidence-based practices that have been identified to be effective in school-based community settings for individuals with autism from birth all the way up to age 22. And so we provide our targeted audience so far has been special education and general education teachers, related service personnel, early interventionists, and paraprofessionals. So primarily out of those groups, we have focused on special education teachers as well as paraprofessionals. We have a subset of modules specifically for paraprofessionals. We have overall about 258,000 users of our AFIRM modules, and about 11,000 of those are early interventionists. And what we have found is that early interventionists need a different set of information about how they can really partner with both families as well as child care providers to help families and child care educators implement these evidence-based practices in natural settings with the toddlers that they work with. So each of the modules kind of take the same format around looking at each specific practice and how do you plan for that practice, how do you use that practice, and then how do you monitor that practice? How do you know if it's working or not working? And so again, as I just stated, we had this need that we knew that early intervention providers needed more support, that the resources we were offering weren't enough to really provide information about foundational evidence-based practices that early intervention providers would be working with families and child care educators to use in natural settings such as the home or a child care center. And so what we really want to do is focus on commonly used evidence-based practices or foundational practices that are often used within these natural settings for young children birth to age 3. So our toddler age group that might be identified with as diagnosed with autism, or maybe having a similar needs as young children with autism. Maybe they need perhaps more social support, more support around communication, perhaps behavior as well. And so we really wanted to tailor these modules to facilitate and support what early intervention providers are doing in these natural settings. And so to make sure that we were able to do this, we started this project, it's been about 6 months ago at this point, and we really wanted to have community engagement and really have a clear understanding of what those needs were from family members as well as EI providers. So we had 2 focus groups specifically for family members, and we had 2 focus groups for early intervention providers. And the purpose for this is to really understand, what we needed to change and adapt within our existing AFIRM modules to create new modules that would really meet support needs for this group of early intervention providers. So our key takeaways from this is that there really needs to be more clarification on roles and responsibilities for families, early interventionists, and child care providers about what's expected of families in an early intervention service model, was expected of child care educators who early intervention providers might be going in to support as well. What were the different roles and responsibilities of those groups? Many families also expressed the need for videos examples showing what do these practices look like in my home, as well as early intervention providers expressed the need for having videos to share with child care educators on what these practices look like in their settings as well. And then shareable and downloadable resources were often requested of information about these practices that you could leave with child care providers or with families, as well as more information about a process for using coaching model to provide feedback for families, as well as opportunities for listening to podcasts, maybe podcast style interviews, more auditory learning throughout. So those were kind of our key takeaways from these focus groups. And so with that in mind, we took a step back and looked at what kind of information and to really express what those roles and responsibilities were, as well as information about the coaching model. As we know, this is, families' first experiences with receiving services, and it can be kind of a tricky situation. And so we developed this, or we modified this process of selecting evidence-based practices, having joint planning of using evidence-based practices with family or child care providers, modeling that use, providing opportunities for parent and caregivers to practice, and then receiving feedback and reflection. So with that in mind, we have developed an introduction to evidence-based practices in the AFT, which is the AFIRM for Toddler model. And that's kind of the model that I just showed. So we're going to have a module introducing these topics. Then we're going to have 2 modules about naturalistic interventions, one that's going to be focused on family with a parent implemented intervention focused as well, which are both evidence-based practices, and one that's more child care educator focused. So what does that look like using naturalistic intervention as an evidence-based practice when you're working with child care settings? And then we get into those foundational evidence-based practices for reinforcement, prompting, and visual supports. And then for early intervention providers who might be working with families and caregivers around behavior, we will also have a functional behavior assessment included as well. And so the AFIRM for Learning Structure is going to follow the similar format for our standing AFIRM modules, where we'll have basic information about evidence-based practice. There'll be planning information as well, but it'll be really focused on joint planning with a caregiver, coaching on the use of the evidence-based practice. So not just using a practice, but how do you coach through that process? And then monitoring the impact of that evidence-based practice. And so we're going to use innovative technology throughout this process. We have video examples. We will have a video library. That was a need we heard from our community members. Engaging case examples, audio clips, also something that we heard from our focus groups. Interactive assessments where users receive real feedback. And then also demonstration of practices in the homes. That was also a key area of need. And so these new AFIRM for Toddler modules will include all of these components. We'll also have downloadable or shareable resources such as early intervention provider fidelity checklists, caregiver implementation checklists, planning guides, data collection forms, and kind of question starters for families and childcare providers. So what questions might you ask early intervention providers to increase those dialogues back and forth? So we're really excited. We are at the time of this recording, we're finishing up some of the development processes of our first 3 modules, which will include that introduction, as well as naturalistic and implemented and parent implemented interventions for toddlers in both the home and childcare settings. In the fall of 2022, we will be releasing reinforcement, prompting, visual supports, and functional behavior assessment. So we're really excited about these modules. We hope that you can that you will be able to access them soon. If you do not have an account for AFIRM, please sign up. Again, that's AFIRM, AFIRM, at fpg.unc.edu. And you can see our contact information here if you have any questions. And I just want to again end by saying that none of the views or content that I presented on were the views or represent the policy of the Department of Education. Thank you so much. And please email me if you have any questions. Thank you.